Brought to you by bedroombattlefields.com, this is the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. It's Matthew with you here, and on this episode I've got quite a lot of hobby related stuff to talk through. No guest today, so unfortunately you're just stuck with me, but fear not, we've plenty to talk about and I'm sure we could get through it together. That sounds really miserable, doesn't it? I'm sure we could endure this. Tell you what, open your podcatcher or your podcast app and stick it up to double speed, and then you'll be able to battle through it much quicker. So anyway, the thing I want to kick off with is actually a little request for voice feedback. So I've decided to experiment with doing this new feature, this question of the month feature. I can't speak properly. It's early in the morning time of recording. So what I'd like you to do, if you would be so kind as to indulge me, is to head on over to bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail. That's all one word. And there's a wee button there and you can record some audio feedback. And the question that I'm asking for throughout February 2024, time of recording, is Warhammer the Old World. Will you be playing it? And if so, why? And if not, why not? I'm just curious to everyone's got an opinion on this. Everyone in the hobby's got an opinion on this, I would say. And I'm really interested to hear yours. So, it could be as little or as long feedback as you like. I don't know what the cap is, maybe 5 minutes or something like that. I don't imagine you'd need any longer than that. But please do let me know your opinions on the matter. You could just, I think this thing works better if you're on a computer, but you could potentially do it on your phone as well. It's not an actual phone call, by the way. It's just a audio record button. And obviously, if you have your own podcast, if you have a YouTube channel, an Instagram account, a website, a blog, feel free to give that a wee shout out too, and send the masses of listeners that this podcast has your way as well. So like I say, bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail is the page that you'll find the voice feedback button. So Warhammer the Old World, will you be playing it? If so, why? And if not, why not? So with that out the way, what's been the latest at my end? I did manage to play a game with Robert. We played a game of Brutal Quest set in Mordheim with a scenario sort of reskinned from a book that I'm going to talk about later on called Sci-Fi, Skirmishes Scenarios by John Lambshead. So I know that I've usually done like audio battle reports before, and we tried a different format there. Basically, I had a couple of lavalier mics, wireless mics, that just pin onto your jersey. And I thought, well, instead of doing a preamble to this game and then we catch up maybe sort of halfway through to find out what's going on, and then we talk about it post-game as well, I just thought, let's just leave the mics on and I'll record the whole game and then I'll edit it into some coherent that would work in an audio format. But it was nearly 3 hours audio. Just there'd be so much to go through, and I'm not entirely convinced it would make for a good listening experience. So I think I'll just... I'll probably not edit that up and publish it, at least anytime soon. So we did have a really good game. It went really well, really enjoyable. I've spoke about before, Brutal Quest and its sister game, Planet 28. These are really good wee systems. Really, really like those. So we used Mordheim as the setting, and I went with... two different small war bands, so almost party-like war bands, the party of 4. So, your sorcerer, both parties had one of those. We had the sort of small dwarf, heavily armoured character, the big tough barbarian character, and the ranger style character. So I went the goodies, because I am a goodie. I was using my Oathsworn miniatures there. And Robert, of course, being a very bad person, he went the evil folks. So that was a couple of hobgoblins, a chaos dwarf, and a sort of mutant demon barbarian. So I think I did win in the end. Basically, the scenario was, and like I say, this was reskinned because the book's for Sci-Fi, Skirmish Scenarios. So it was a sort of collection mission. So there were a number of objectives on the tabletop, and these were basically, I used little tarantula miniatures as the markers there, because they weren't actually in play. But the idea was that characters would need to get up to those objectives, and each turn that they remained unopposed beside them, they would collect, in our instance, in our scenario, it was Warpstone. So I think I, in the end, managed to collect more than Robert did. But again, we were, when you play this kind of game in the narrative spirit, there were opportunities for me to be out of sight quite early, because my ranger, he was a little mouse, and he had this trait which enabled him to basically be quite fast. It was kind of random. It involved a dice roll at the start of each turn, but he was lightning quick. So once he'd accumulated a certain amount of this warpstone, I could have just basically got behind a building and hid, and I don't think that Robert would have been able to do anything about that. By the time he got up there, I could have been away somewhere else. So these scenarios could be so easily gamed if you were playing to win. But obviously we're not doing that. We're playing for the story. So, I ended up bringing him back into play and kind of risking him to do a few more things. I had the opportunity to move another couple of characters out of sight, and I didn't do that because, like, you're possibly the same as me, but that's just not the way I want to play. Like, I'd rather tell a fun story, lose the game to a 90th minute equaliser or whatever, which nearly happened. Like, it was... I'd kind of deliberately left them in sight so that Robert's sorcerer could get this firebolt away it was the last turn of the game. And if he'd killed my ranger, I think he would have got a draw. But he didn't roll very well, and that was that. But good fun game. And I think I'm in two minds as to whether to do what we've done before with these games and record them. Like, I have enjoyed doing that. I've enjoyed... doing, like I say, we have a chat before, we have a chat at half time, and we have a chat at the end. I keep using football metaphors here, don't I? But there's part of my brain that thinks you might be able to get more games in if you take that out of the equation completely, so that, that there is a wee bit of work goes into recording a game. There are other considerations, even down to the fact you need to regularly check in on the audio, make sure things are recording. You have to have the equipment on hand. So part of me thinks if we're gaming, we should just be gaming, and I should just concentrate on that, and I would probably enjoy it a bit more as well. I would probably get more immersed in the game, and I would maybe be able to focus more on what I was doing in the game, what was happening in the story, and let the rules melt into the background as well, just by getting more and more used to one rule system, and just take the content creation side out of it altogether. And obviously, there are other opportunities like this to talk about the game on the show. But it's been suggested in a few places, well, maybe a video battle report, and I'm like, as much as I appreciate feedback, and I appreciate that people would like to see that, it's just not something I'm going to get involved in at all. Video's another thing altogether. It would just add more layers of complexity, more layers of production time, things like that. So I'm never ever going to do that. I'll just say that right now. I'll not be doing any video battle reports. I've done a couple of videos where I've just set the table up, and I've done a quick video showing, the table set up, basically. Here's what we're going to play, but I think that's as far as it'll go. There is a YouTube accompaniment channel to this podcast where the audio episodes are just, they go up there with a static image background. But I've used that channel to stick a couple of wee videos up there. But videos, it's something that I'll just dabble in very rarely, if at all. But getting back to the game, like, I really enjoyed it, and I want to play more this year. I really do. And if taking the recording equation out of things makes that happen even once more, then it's going to be worth it, and I'll just talk about the games. I could maybe even get Robert on, a different day. We could have a chat about it. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about that at the moment on the playing front. I did take some photos. You'll find them at bedroombattlefields.com as ever. So I've taken some photos of the game. You could see, how things were set up. You'll find that wee YouTube video there as well, embedded on the post. But yeah, you'll get a wee idea how the table was set up and what the two warbands looked like as well. On the painting front, I have actually got a couple of things finished this side of the new year. So we're in early February now. So my 15mm project continues. I was going to say a pace there. It's not really any sort of pace, but it's continuing. It's slow and steady wins the race and all that. So the latest regiment to be completed was my 15mm Chaos Warriors. I'm sure they came from Ral Partha. I'm not sure. I'm fairly certain is the better term there. So they were painted up. I got a wee bit of feedback throughout the process in our Discord community, which I appreciated, because I started off by just doing a dry brush of like a sort of bronze colour, because they're completely armoured from head to toe, so it was just like a bronze dry brush over a dark undercoat, and I put some leather on the gloves and I think the back of their boots, and then the shields I went bright red, because of course who doesn't like bright red when you got into the hobby in the mid-90s like I did. So the shields, and then I think it was Rob who'd said go and put some red on the helmets as well, so I did that too, and I'm pleased with how that came out. So the shields it's basically Rudolph's nose. Like I'll definitely need to put a wee decal transfer on each one to add something to it, but that'll come in time. I think I'm going to focus on painting up these two armies, the good army and the bad army, and I've got a fair idea like the decals that I could put on, but I'm not getting too distracted with that at the moment because I'm still painting my way through other things. So they'll get a wee coat of varnish on them for now and call them done. So there was the Chaos Warriors. There was also 5 trolls as well from, again, I think, Ral Partha. So these would work at 28mm if they were like human-sized trolls, but obviously we're using them in 15mm, they've got that extra height and bulk. So I've got them in a row of 5. They're housed in a movement tray from Warbases, who I've spoke about on a previous episode as well. So I'm pleased with how they came out. I used the Frostheart contrast paint on the skin to give them that kind of bluey, turquoisey type tone. So I am happy with them. They didn't need a lot. They were really easy models to paint. That balance between like enough detail but not an obscene amount. So you kind of hit that sweet spot where it's fun to paint, but you don't just think it's bland, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, got them done. I actually did a wee post as well on the site showing works in progress. I never put content out to say like here's how to do something. It's more just a documentation of like here's a thing that's worked for me and here's how I do it and here's why I do it. So I decided to take some pictures of these models, like basically from the point they were glued to the bases throughout the, I'm talking about the fact that I do the base before I do the undercoat, and I don't know if that's particularly unusual. Like maybe a lot of other folk do that too, but there's a few reasons I do that. I mean, mainly it's a workflow thing. I find it just makes the process quicker and more efficient for me, but also I like the overall consistency that I get, because I'm doing the Zenithal undercoat, the Zenithal highlight, and I find if the basing material's already there, it just it makes it more consistent, if that makes sense. So I put a post up on bedroombattlefields.com showing the different stages of that, so you'll get a wee look at that if you fancy, and you'll see the finished article as well, the finished trolls, along with their comrades, the finished Chaos Warriors. The bad army, I've talked about this, it's like a Battle Masters inspired bad army, because there's orcs and goblins and Chaos Warriors and just generally bad things in this army, like the old classic Battle Masters baddies. So the bad guys are kind of eking ahead of the good guys at this stage in terms of what's been painted, because I've got that big, like, I don't know what you would call him, a big rock demon type guy. He was a freebie from Alternative Armies. I've got him, I've got my trolls, and that's 2 units now, a unit of Chaos Warriors and a unit of Orc Warriors. The good guys at this stage, I'm sure they only have they were like Paladin Knights, so they've been painted up, and I think that's it for the good guys at this stage. So I'm sorting them out with a cannon. I'm in the process of painting up this cannon at the moment, so they'll get a war machine in there, and then I think I'm going to probably focus next on getting their cavalry or their archers in place. So I do have both armies. both 15mm armies. Like I've said on a previous episode, 2 full armies. I'd be surprised if it was much more than like £110, £120 for the lot. So great value at this scale, and I'm still really happy with the aesthetic. I don't feel like it's proper crunched down, 6mm or that. Again, a scale I really respect, but just not quite the right aesthetic for me. So I am really, really enjoying the 15mm stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next with that and get more of them on the painting table. And as long-time listeners to the podcast will know, my 2-year-old daughter is a Labyrinth super fan these days, so that prompted me to have a wee look on Etsy for a couple of things. So first and foremost, I got a really good 28mm Jareth / David Bowie miniature, and he's now painted up, so you'll find a picture of him on bedroombattlefields.com. But there were actually there were a couple other Labyrinth options on Etsy. I really like Etsy for stuff like this. So I got basically the rest of the Labyrinth cast: Ludo, Hoggle, Sarah, and Didymus. I know them all inside out now because of my wee girl. So I got them. I don't know if you'd call these 3D prints. I don't know how they were made, but they're much more like a robust plastic, I would say, which is good because they're for a 2-year-old to play with. So I got these, again, photos on bedroombattlefields.com, and they came really quick, which is good. Sometimes Etsy, you do wait a wee while. I understand it's all sort of independent folks doing their best with substandard services like Royal Mail, but these came really quick, and I was thinking, I had this funny thought as well. I was like, should I paint them before I give them to my daughter? Could she play unpainted? And then I thought, well, that's ridiculous. She's 2. So I showed her them, and she was over the moon. So suddenly these wee characters, she's got this little toy cafe with Peter Rabbit miniature. I was going to call them miniatures. They are pretty much 28mm scale. So that's a wee idea for another day. But I just see the Labyrinth cast are in this wee cafe that she's got, Ludo, the big hairy guy, he's sitting having a cup of coffee with like Mrs. Tiggywinkle, Peter Rabbit or somebody like that. But in the evenings, when I've had the opportunity to paint, I've been sneaking them upstairs, got a black base coat, did a wee zenithal highlight for them, and I've done the old skeleton horde contrast, like just all over the whole thing to kind of add some detail. That's just the way I paint things. But each time I've been bringing them back down, and you can't be too precious about these things because, again, they were bought for a 2-year-old to play with. But I had the black undercoat on, and the next day I see her, and she's just got 2 of them. She usually plays really well with stuff. She's got a great imagination, but she's just, for some reason, got 2 of them, and she's just battering them together. And I could literally see the wee chips in them. I didn't say anything to her. I don't want to go down that route. Don't do that. I've painted these. These are painted miniatures. So I've been getting them back upstairs when I can, and just touching the wee areas up that she's chipped, and they'll inevitably get chipped again. But who knows in the future if she decides she likes painting or wants to paint or that at a semi-serious level, then we'll strip them and we'll paint them again. I'll let her paint them. But they're great wee models. Like I say, they have got a decent level of detail, but they definitely err on the durability, I would say, which is great, again, for their use case, for the case that they are intended. But it's good to know that they'll always be fine for getting a cup of coffee and a wee wooden pizza alongside, like, say, the cast of Peter Rabbit and some of the other wee toys that she's got as well. Back to Etsy, back to shopping on Etsy, and I did get some really good 3D Man of War ships that I've started working on as well. So I bought a fleet each from 2 different sellers, and I'm really impressed with both. I've got them now. So again, photos and links on bedroombattlefields.com, but I've started painting away on those. I used, as much as I've seen photos of Armada, which is the rule set that I intend to use when I finally get these on the tabletop, the bases for Armada, I've always seen them being the clear acrylic so that you could see the playing mat, the sea underneath. But I thought there was a good opportunity here to use MDF and to base them up with a kind of water effect. So I got my appropriate sized bases, which I've never ever done before. I've never sought out to find, a base of a particular size, but it's quite important for this game and how the ships turn and manoeuvre and stuff like that. So I got my bases ordered up from War Bases, and I used the Vallejo plastic putty I just covered the base around the ship and just moved that around with my wee, I was going to call it my wee pokey stick. That's the technical term for a tool that I use for jobs like this, the wee pokey stick. So, got it not too hard to make something just look like it's liquid, because you don't need any ability for that. So once that had hardened up, and again, I got my undercoat on the ships, and I've used the contrast paint Azurman Blue, I think that's what it's called. So I covered the wave effect in that, and then I used my old classic Skull White from the mid-90s, genuine pot of Skull White. I just dry brushed a bit of that over the waves as well, just to give them the sort of white foamy edges. So I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. Again, you'll see photos on the website if you're interested. And the way I'm painting these ships as well, I've never done ships before, but I'm going really basic but bright and bold. So I guess that's the 3 Bs there. There's potential there, isn't there? But yeah, not doing a lot of different colours. I just want them to really stand out. I think there's 6 or 7 ships in each fleet. So I want a really strong contrast between each in terms of their sails. So I'm not doing a lot to them, like I say. And the fleet that I'm working on at the moment is like big, bright red and yellow sails. I was going to call them banners. Sails is the word. So I'm not quite sure what I'll do with the other fleet when it comes to painting them. But again, I'm wanting to do something that's in quite a striking contrast to the rival fleet. So that'll be a work in progress over the next few months. But I'm getting through them quite quickly, because again, it's all about big areas, big colours. But it's really enjoyable. It's a good palette cleanser from painting up the stuff that I usually paint up as well. Some other stuff that I'm painting as well, a couple of captive/prisoner miniatures from Midlum. These will come in handy for narrative scenarios, basically. There's one guy, he's on his knees with his hands tied behind his back and his head kind of bowed, and the other guy is standing up, hands behind the back with a bag on his head. So neither of these guys having a great time of it, but there'll be scenarios in the future where those miniatures will be just really handy to have for some story-driven reason or another. I also got myself a Kev Adams Demon. Again, I'm almost going out on a limb and saying this was via Ral Partha, but when I was shopping on there, I spotted this demon, and I just really liked it. It's like if you asked Alexa, show me what a modern day Games Workshop miniature doesn't look like, this would be the picture that you would get. So this goblin, it's got the charm of a Kev Adams goblin, but it's like a little winged demon guy, and he's got a big old fork as well. So that's a fun miniature that would work at any scale. Like I could use him at 28mm, I could use him at 15mm as a slightly bigger. I could use him as like a bloodthirster, I suppose, at 15mm, which would definitely look quite funny. And in terms of painting, that's about it. Like I say, I'm working on a cannon. I'm working on this big sort of Halloween looking, which is funny because it's February, but this big Halloween looking guy with a pumpkin for a head. So I've just started work on that. And like I say, 15mm cavalry or archers will probably be next on the list as well. And then I've got a ton of varnishing to get through too, but it's all good fun. I don't get loads of time to paint, but when I do, I try and make the most of it, like I'm sure you do as well. On the podcast and content front, if you listened to our previous episode with Joe McCulloch, which I got a lot of good feedback from that, and of course, Joe's always excellent to come on and talk to. We're really lucky to have him in this niche of the hobby that I think you and I are in, the very story-driven side of things. So it was great to have Joe on, and of course, I did ask him that question that I'd asked a few of the well-known names that have been on the show, the question about gaming mechanics, and I've really enjoyed the answers to these questions. And I did decide to go ahead and publish the answers to the favourite gaming mechanic question all in one place. So I'll put links to everything, by the way, everything mentioned in this episode. I'll put links in the show notes, but I've got this post now where we have the answers from Joe, along with folks like, Andy Chambers, Rick Priestley, Jervis Johnson, Thomas Pirinen, Alessio Calvatore and Gav Thorpe. I hope I've not forgotten anyone there, but I've got all the answers to those guys' favourite gaming mechanics that either they created themselves or that they have just enjoyed in someone else's game. So that's all in written form now in a post on bedroombattlefields.com. So that's a post on the favourite gaming mechanics of the masters, if you like. And like I say, great feedback from that episode with Joe. You know, a lot of discussion about what was really meant by this less is more approach. And in our Discord community, you know, I did have a wee back and forth with Jason, who was, concerned's the wrong word, but he was, I think he was wondering if this smaller scale meant, you know, literally smaller scale as in skirmish games, less models and stuff like that. And if you've listened to Jason on the podcast before, you know, he's got these massive armies at 28 mil, you know, it's big grand scale stuff. And to me, that isn't about, you know, that isn't the opposite of what Joe was saying about less is more. I think you could have a less is more approach with massive armies, with loads of miniatures. I think it's more about less is more in terms of projects. Like, how many different projects do you either have on the go at any one time, and how much new stuff, new rule systems, new miniature ranges and that are you always getting into and bringing on board with your hobby as well. I think it's about, you know, this going deeper, this, you know, I've got these 3 or 4 rule sets and I know them very well. I've got this book of scenarios, I've got this collection of miniatures, no matter how big that might be, but, you know, every regiment, I know its history, you know, it's got its names, I've got these characters, there can be depth at a grand scale, if that makes sense. So I definitely don't think it's about, you know, we all play tiny skirmish games. That's definitely not how I interpret that less is more approach. But yeah, if you've not heard that episode, by the way, it was the last one on the feed. Really good episode with Joe, and he's been on the show a couple of times before then as well. So those are well worth checking out if you haven't already heard them. And on the subject of slowness and depth in the hobby, you've maybe heard me talking on the show before about the Slow Hobbyist Manifesto, which was partly written tongue-in-cheek, but, you know, there's a lot of genuine sentiments in there too, and it's been great to hear from folks that feel that it resonates with them and their approach as well. And I know I've touched on this in previous episodes, but I just actually wanted to go through it now point by point and let you hear each one, just in case you've not had the chance to get on the website and read it. And I've actually added one in here as well off the back of speaking to Cam, because he was talking in his episode about being a good steward and passing the torch and things like that. So that's been since added into the manifesto as well. So let's get a wee look at it now. So point 1 is a miniature agnostic approach. We embrace a diversity of miniatures, choosing models based on our personal preferences rather than succumbing to the pressure of the latest releases. Our armies are a unique reflection of our individual tastes and creativity. 2 is the art of patience. We reject the notion of instant gratification and embrace the slow, meditative process of painting. A little progress each week accumulates into a masterpiece over the course of a year. Our armies are not just collections, they are the product of patience, dedication and love for the craft. Number 3 is deep dive into rule sets. We immerse ourselves in the intricacies of rule sets, delving deep into the nuances of each game system we adopt. We value mastery over variety, savouring the richness of each rulebook and relishing the strategic depth that comes with a profound understanding of the mechanics. 4 is resistance to hype. We resist the allure of new releases and the constant drumbeat of hype that surrounds them. Our choices are guided by genuine interest and the desire for a lasting connection with our miniatures and the games we play. Trends may come and go, but our commitment endures. Number 5 is nostalgia as a guiding light. We cherish the nostalgia of old rule systems, classic miniatures, and the timeless aesthetic of traditional craftsmanship. Our journey is a celebration of the history and evolution of the hobby, honouring the pioneers and the classics that paved the way. Number 6 is quality over quantity in gaming. We may not have the opportunity to play games frequently, but when we do, it is a cherished occasion. Each game is an immersive experience and we savour the camaraderie, strategy and narrative unfolding on the tabletop. Number 7 is favouring storytelling and narrative experience. We prioritise the narrative experience on the tabletop. We've enriched stories around our armies and battles. Each miniature represents a character with a history, and every game unfolds as a chapter in an ongoing saga. The narrative adds depth and meaning to our hobby, transcending the mere mechanics of play. Number 8 is rejecting the notion of perfect balance. We reject the pressure for every game to be perfectly balanced and fair, embracing the unpredictability and quirks of the rules. We find joy in the narrative twists that arise from the unbalanced nature of our chosen games. It's in these imbalances that stories become more vibrant, unique and memorable. Number 9 is being good stewards of the hobby. We recognise our role as custodians of a rich and storied tradition. We lead by example, inspiring younger generations to embrace the slow, deliberate approach that defines our passion. We encourage patience, creativity, and a genuine love for the craft, nurturing a community where the values of the hobby endure and flourish, and all are welcome. And number 10 is community and camaraderie. We build a community based on shared values, camaraderie, and a genuine passion for the hobby. Our gatherings are not just about the games, but also about the exchange of ideas, tips, and the joy derived from our collective creativity. So again, like I've said many times before, very grandiose, very flowery, but the sentiments there are truly genuine, and I hope you do enjoy that. You might not agree with all of it, and that's fine. I'm not forcing your own ethos on you. And yeah, this is all just a bit of fun, but that's the Slow Hobbyist Manifesto, and again you'll find a link to the article itself in the show notes. Something else that I wanted to talk about, and I'd alluded to this earlier, is a book called Sci-Fi Skirmish Scenarios by John Lambshead. It's got a foreword from Rick Priestley as well. I think the two work together quite regularly, and I put a wee review up on the site because I really loved this book. Like, it is in all honesty, like my favourite hobby book that I've read so far, because it's given you stuff to actually, set up your tabletop, and there's things to do and achieve. So I love getting rules. I love rule sets. I love reading how they work. And, that alone generates ideas, and you'll often get scenarios that come with rule books and stuff like that. But here's a book that is just about scenarios. It's agnostic to what rule system you're using, and there's loads of variety in there. I think it's 36 overall scenarios. There are one or two of them that are very similar. You're always going to get that, especially with that amount of scenarios in there. But it gives you so many good ideas, either to follow these scenarios verbatim or just put a little twist or adapt them slightly. And as you heard me saying at the start, they're sci-fi skirmish scenarios, but you could reskin them for fantasy or historical or whatever. You're not bound to that setting. I think it's just, if you're writing a book like that, it would be far too generic just to say miniature wargame scenarios, because there'd be a lot of caveats, if it's bows and arrows, then this, if it's laser guns, then this. So John putting that sci-fi element to it just lets him concentrate on that. And I think we're all clever enough. If you could read the book, and if you play games anyway, you'll have the imagination where you could tweak things here and there. So I would get this even if you don't play in the sci-fi sandbox. Like, if you do historicals, if you do fantasy, or a bit of both, you could still definitely benefit from having this game in your library. And I think the scenarios alone are worth the money of the book, which, by the way, isn't very much. I want to say it's like £12, something like that. So really nothing at all compared to some of the prices you see in this hobby for things. But you've got the scenarios. You've also got chapters on, there's random scenario generation, and there's tools on how to do that. If you did manage to play through all these scenarios and want to keep it going, there's ways to do that. He talks about campaigns and linking scenarios together, and there's elements, there's instructions on solo play, and there's cool solo scenarios in there too if you're a solo war gamer. So there really is something for everyone in this book. In terms of some of the ideas and mechanics that John offers for solo play, one of them was the Wandering Monster, and we actually used this in our recent game of Brutal Quest. So you've got an NPC monster in the middle of the table, and at the start of each turn, We were just using a d6 because that's what it said in the book, but you could use any dice really. The idea is, we're going into the start of the next turn, we're both going to roll, and if one player beats the other person's roll by 2, they get to control this random monster for that turn. And, you could make the random monster pretty powerful, and you could do a bit of damage, cause a bit of chaos there, but likewise, you don't want to get too close to it because it could turn on you in the next turn as well. So I just thought that was a really cool way to mix it up with a game. Even if you were just doing the standard pitched battle, you could chuck the random monster in there and that would really liven things up as well. So yeah, that was just one little cool thing in this book, packed with really cool and interesting ideas. The electric screen scenario, I think I've talked about that on the podcast before, but again, just a nice highlight for me, this big screen. It could be an electric screen, it could be a magic screen, but you've got both warbands on either side, and there are rewards for trying to get through there and kill the opponents on their side, but it doesn't come without its risks as well. So I'm looking forward to trying that one out. Another really fun one that I noticed was a scenario called Drone Dance. So the idea here was that there's a drone on the tabletop, and both players are trying to chase it and catch it and get it under their control. And the way it moves is almost like a ball. So if you take a bird's eye view of your playing area, your tabletop, your mat, whatever, and the drone, it's just going to basically move around. It's going to hit the edge of the table and rebound back, and it's just going to act like a bouncing ball, a perpetually bouncing ball all around that playing area. So it's always moving, and the players are trying to chase it. And this got me thinking. Again, this is what's really nice about a book like this, because it gets you thinking about things in a different way. It presents things that you maybe not considered before. And it's funny how you maybe sit on an idea for months or years, and you might have forgotten about it, but I'd always been thinking about, like, and I dare say I'm not the only one here, but a 1v1 miniatures game, can that be done? Like, I've got one miniature, you've got one miniature. It's almost arena combat style. And it turns out, that games like this do exist and people have managed to pull it off. But for me, the big barrier with a game like this is, so why bother with the miniatures other than just decoration? Like, if I had a gladiator and you had a gladiator, and we just played this as if it were a normal, quote unquote, normal skirmish game. Both players, they're going to move into combat, and that's all they're going to have to do is just start fighting. Once they're locked in combat, there's really no need for miniatures. So I'd always wondered about, like, are there ways around that? And then it must have just been sitting in my subconscious. And then when I saw this idea for the drone, I thought, well, that's maybe the key here, is if you've got one miniature each, there needs to be a reason why these characters need to keep moving. So if you took that drone mechanic and replaced the drone with, you're replacing that with something that they're then trying to avoid, so they need to keep moving. So in a fantasy setting, just a ball of magic fire or something like that. It could be a giant creature or insect. It could be, it could be an arena in a dystopian or sci-fi sort of setting where, if players stop for any length of time, there's maybe like a sniper, a slaver or something like that going to take a shot at them. So maybe that is just the bead of their gun moving around the table. So it got me thinking about that, like a 1v1 sort of arena combat game, bringing in a mechanic like this, something that's moving, auto-generated, but it's moving around the table, and it means that you need to keep moving. You can't just sit there and fight each other. You've got to be more dynamic. You've got to keep dodging and things like that. So I'd put a post up on the site about that as well. I had some ideas of my own, not trying to claim full credit here at all, because like I say, this is an idea that I've picked from the book, but I've kind of got my own spin on it and proposed some ideas as well. So if you've ever been interested in doing 1v1 games and trying them out, and you hadn't thought about this idea before, then check out the show notes for a link to that post as well, and who knows, maybe you'll get some ideas for your own games. So that's that, Sci-Fi Skirmish Scenarios by John Lambshead. You'll find that on Amazon, and I dare say it's available in a few different online stores as well. But just a brilliant book. Definitely my favourite book in my collection, and I've got a lot of favourite books, but there's just so much to do in this book. There's so much to try out, and it'll get you thinking about your own ideas as well, and your own scenarios and ways to tweak those. Alright then, we're getting towards the end of the episode. Thanks very much for sticking with me. I just have one more shout out for that voice question of the month. Again, I'd really love to hear your opinions and your feedback on Warhammer The Old World. Are you going to be playing it? And if so, what's causing you to dive in? I'd love to hear it. What are your hopes for the game? Have you tried it so far? What army are you going to be using? Will it be a new army? Is it an existing army? So, tell me all about that. And on the flip side, if you've no interest in playing it, why not? There's an argument that this game coming back will be massively interesting and exciting for folks listening to this show. So if you're deciding not to play it, then, what are your reasons for not doing so? Like I say, bedroombattlefields.com/voicemail is where you could find that wee button to send your audio feedback. And please do shout out your own podcast, YouTube channel, social media account, website, blog, whatever you've got to document your hobby content. All right, that's it. That's all I've got. And thanks once again for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. If you enjoy the show, then please do share it with someone else you think might enjoy it too. And be sure to check out our Discord community of like-minded hobbyists, which you could find at bedroombattlefields.com/Discord. It'd be great to see you in there.